We have your attention to the streets. We're about to get into the video from there.
Well, I'm on the university. I understand. Academic investments in so many things. We're all sitting in our restaurants together. You recognize any of these symptoms?
Oh, there's so much.
Numbness, stress, isolation, indifference, lack of engagement, overreaching, polarization, attack, collective blaming. To name only a few. It's going to take courage, but we've got to step up and take action, both as individuals and as communities. We need to each act responsibly and take up our roles in a collective team. Compassion is never a solo or individual effort. What I do impacts all of us. What we do impacts each of us. That's what this Healing Community Collaborative SA is all about. Healing together. Creating safe spaces together. Telling stories and listening to each other's experiences together. Taking opportunities to really see others and realizing that we're not alone in our pain or in our pain. And any fun. Horse fests. Neighbors together at National Night Out. Stress reduction bingo. Storytelling. Big update. Check out some of these real San Antonio examples that are worth repeating in your own name.
Wow. Thank you.
So just out of curiosity, how many of you play stress reducing bingo? Well, we want to welcome you to the healing power of stories. We are really grateful for all of you that are here to participate in this fantastic event. My name is David Paka. I am affiliated here with the Institute for the Study of Contemporary Spirituality, or just the ISCS. It's an honor and a pleasure to host this event here on our campus at Oblate School of Theology, and it's an honor to be here with all of you. And this is Sharon.
This is Sharon, and I actually am an archaeologist who has fallen in love with feminism basically from the day I got here, February 29, 2020. Fallen in love with this complex, diverse city, full of contradictions and a soul, as is evidenced by our four wonderful authors who are going to speak to us today. A little about me. I'm an oral historian with and Jewish studies researcher with a special interest in dialogue and in particular difficult dialogue. And I also teach listening skills because, well, you can't dialogue with someone you can't hear. So anyway, so grateful to be here with you.
So, a couple housekeeping issues. I'm going to ask if you could just take your cell phone out, make sure it's on silent. It would be appreciated by all. We'll even do that up here, just to make sure. If you need restrooms, we are not planning any breaks today, so if you need a comfort break, feel free to go outside. Not really go outside. The restrooms, they are east here. If you're not good at directions, out the door to the right and then the left, you'll find the restrooms on this side of the building. Today is both meant to be an experience with you, but also something that can be replicated in small groups, in your homes with friends, or in other congregations. We have handouts on every other one of the chairs to give you kind of the basics of how we're going to be proceeding. We're also going to be talking a lot about the website that you see up on the screen today. We're going to be doing PSAs or portal story announcements throughout the day to highlight some of the things that we have on the website. We're going to hear all kinds of things about different stories being told in San Antonio and elsewhere that will help us connect with the power of story. Book sales will also be going on in the hallway afterwards for a little bit. And if you see in the four corners of the room, that we do have tables set up for our authors to sign books after our event today. So if you do purchase one of their books, we'd like them to sign it, they will be able to do that for you. One important note, because we are covering a few difficult topics today, if at any time you personally feel like what is happening in this room is stressful or challenging to you, and if you need to take a break and walk out, that is completely fine. We will honor ourselves and honor the stories that are being told together as we work to hear and listen and share this to one another.
Yeah, exactly, David. So let's start. We're not going to initiate an important part of what we're going to be doing here today. And that is to connect with each other around what we're hearing, like what touches us, what upsets us, like authentically, how it lands with us, right? And sharing that in triad, okay? So what we need to do right now, it's not like a talking now, but it's an arranging of ourselves. And it doesn't matter if the meat rolls are not preserved, you know? But find two other people, and it's possible that you haven't met before, but as long as you're three, and just kind of angle or push or whatever, get yourself to do that right now, and then I'll tell you what keep going. Okay, so once you've got your three, all you're going to do now is say your name and what brought you here today. Okay? Your name and what brought you here.
Okay, thank you for that. If I could have you start turning your attention back up to the front. You will have many opportunities today. You'll have many opportunities today to reconnect with your triad. So let's put that on pause as we continue our program.
So now it's time for our first PSA. What's a PSA? Well, it's a public service announcement, right? Yes. But today it's also a portal story. So different partners in the story portal throughout our program today will each have 30 seconds to say something about their portal on the story portal. So first we have a absolutely amazing and wonderful person. But anyway, Susan, come and talk to us about your story.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm with Compassionate San Antonio. 30 seconds, who's like, what's that? But when the city signed the Compassionate City Resolution in 2017, they required that we collect stories to inspire us to breathe life into what it means to be a compassionate city. So we were under pressure. So we said, we have people writing stories in this city already. They're called the media. And so what we've been doing since 2017 is tweeting the stories that the media are uncovering, from the smallest acts of kindness to corporate and citywide compassion. Since we started, we have more than 4,000 stories on our Twitter account, including 4 we just added today. So we hope that you will read our stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Emma Alexander here. Right here. Okay, Emma, can you tell us about your portal, what it's called, and who it is?
Thank you, Susan. The Healing and Community Collaborative will form similarity to this SA Story Collaborative. Like Stories, our collection is another essential to community healing. Help people creatively gather examples worth repeating. Pathways to hope, connection matters, faith, communities, and collective trauma. Reverend Dr. Colette Coleman asked the question, have you found a place to sit vulnerably without a mask, without a title, without a need to do or to be important, a space without shame or being shamed? Practice transparency to recover safely, recover what's been lost, recover rest. The challenge was to stay in the process. Our new website is healingsatx.org. We'll highlight stories, encourage people to recreate these in their own communities, congregations, and their homes. Join our collaborative. Thank you.
So I have an important announcement to make. Being that we are with storytellers today, and we want to go home for dinner, we are going to treat this a little bit like the Grammys. So if our storytellers are up or we're doing something that's running long, you might hear a bit of a noise like this. So we're just trying to encourage the program to move along a little bit, and we do have a priest and other storytellers. So we're just trying to be cognizant of reality.
Okay, thank you, David, for that most important thing. It's true. I mean, there's so much fabulous content, and we do want to honor everybody who's here by giving them time to share, including everybody in trials. And so now, okay, our first author, Father David Garcia. Many know him from being rector at San Fernando Cathedral, where he and other faith leaders from San Antonio brought multi-religious faith traditions and communities together, especially in wonderful Thanksgiving gatherings. Or you may know his more recent work with the missions in San Antonio and their restorations. So all of our storytellers, we are inviting them to share your own reflection on the healing power of story, and in particular, why from your perspective, stories need to be told, not just in general, but, so, you'll talk, I think, maybe when you read an excerpt from your book. I don't read an excerpt from the book. So, finally, I just want to say that my friend Carrie McKeon, who has been part of your Courageous Concepcion, told me something, and this is what she said. Father David Garcia is the best preacher I've ever heard. He is a master storyteller. The Gospels come alive through his accounts of current events. He connects the public with the personal.
Too much pressure. It's a joy and an honor to be here with the three accomplished. I'm changing glasses here because I'm finished some cataract surgery and I'm kind of readjusting. The three authors that are here today are amazing, and I just want to say it's an honor to be with them. I just want to kind of say a little bit about my book and how it came about. And what happened was, it's called Pandemic Preaching, and it was basically the whole idea of how do you deal with a crisis, and how do you preach about the crisis, and how do you kind of give people something to hang on to as we're going through a crisis. And everybody was going through it, everybody, not just a single group. And so it was kind of this common situation. And so when the pandemic, and especially when the lockdown started, and then they closed the churches, I started getting calls, and one of them was sitting right over there, Cecilia, and they said, we need homilies, we need sermons, we need something to pick us up, the churches are closed, and yeah, we're seeing it streaming on TV, but that's not enough, send us, give us something. And I thought about this for a while, I said, that sounds like work, and I just retired. And I tell everybody I'm retired with the emphasis on tired. So basically, what happened was I finally gave in. I said, okay, let's see what we can do. So for 1 year, every single week, I would do a reflection on something that I thought was going on with the pandemic, whether it was the common ideas that we were going through, the common fears. And there was a lot of things going on initially, and some of you can remember, I'm talking about March of 2020. My book covers from March of 2020 to March of 2021. 52 Sundays and 8 feast days. And what I did was try to get people to understand that what we were going through, and it was difficult, obviously, and many people were suffering tremendously, and many people were going through grief. They had lost maybe friends or relatives, and at times maybe couldn't even be with them at the moment of their death, couldn't be holding their hand or giving them a hug or anything like that, which is horrible, because you're going through a moment of profound loss and profound grief, and you can't do the human things that you want to do, which is just grab somebody and kiss them and hug them and let them know that you're with them up until the very, very last minute. So there was all of these kinds of emotions going through. There was fear, there was, we don't know what this is all about, this is a new virus, you know, there was this loss, there was a lot of anxiety. And then there began to be the blame game that sometimes happens. The Asians did it, you know, and so then there was this anti-Asian thing, which brought back to memory after, and this is something that Sigmund talks about, after 9/11, where there was a very anti-anything having to do with Muslims or with people from the Middle East or people from South Asia or wherever, and so there was this lashing out that it was their fault, you know, and so we trying to kind of get our balance was what I was trying to do, and I was trying to also offer moments of hope. I was trying to say, look, in the first part of the book, I was trying to get people to touch and identify what is it that you're feeling, what is it that you're going through, and it's a common thing that we're all going through, but it's not new. And that's what I was trying to maybe bring across. It's not new. And I'll tell you why it's not new. Look at the scriptures, and look at the Old Testament, look at the New Testament. It's in there if we look and if we make the connections that people have gone through these things before. And then our grandparents went through many of these kinds of things before. So I was trying to offer a moment of context, touch your feelings, be in touch with them, but then understand we're going through this together, and somehow or another we will make it through together, and we will give each other the strength and the hope that we need. And so that was kind of what I was trying to do. And then as the book went on, then I began to identify people and stories that I thought would lift everybody up. So there were stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You know, some of you may have read it. There was a lot of wonderful stories. I was trying to tell stories not only of the medical people, and there was a lot of medical people. For example, the Metropolitan Health Directors, which, by the way, were all women, were working for months without a day off during the height of the pandemic. You know, we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. I told the story of a delivery guy who delivered medication from the Children's Hospital in Houston to a family in San Antonio in the midst of the Great Freeze. He drove his personal car to bring this medication when UPS wouldn't do it, because UPS, their trucks wouldn't make it through the ice and the weather. And he did it, and he saved the life of a 3-year-old child. And it was just an amazing moment of an ordinary person saying, and then the parents told him, we can't believe you did this, and here's a big tip, and he said, I don't want a big tip, I'm just doing my job. You know, a moment like that lifts everybody up. An ordinary person that's doing something absolutely extraordinary. And that's what I try to do. You know, Dr. Ricardo Cigarro in Laredo, you know, he's the brother of Francisco Cigarro, who many of y'all know here in San Antonio. Cardiologist, well known, tremendous practice. And what did he do during COVID? He gave all of that up and just treated people for COVID on both sides of the border. He was constantly crossing the bridge to the poorest people and helping them as well, and he got sick. And he got so sick he had to come in to San Antonio to be treated. Thanks be to God, everything turned out okay. But again, another person stepping up, giving us a sense of hope. So what I wanted to read was from it was the 7th of February of 21, that would have been last year. And the gospel for that particular day was the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. And so those of you that might remember, Jesus goes into Peter's home, and his mother-in-law is very sick. She's in bed, and it says that Jesus goes up to her and lifts her up, and she immediately is out of bed and starts to serve. So the moment of healing was the moment in which then she serves. So that's kind of like what the gospel was all about. So I just want to read a few excerpts, because at that time people were asking me, how come God is allowing all this terrible suffering to happen here with this COVID? Where is God in all of this? So here's what, I'm just going to pick up a few paragraphs here and there. Why does God allow suffering? This question bugs us, especially when we see something like this pandemic affecting so many innocent people. It is not a new question. I asked it over and over when I traveled to some of the poorest areas on earth with Catholic relief services. I read it again recently in an article written by a Jesuit novice who was ministering in a juvenile detention center. He was told by a veteran guard that many of the young people there, predominantly black, would spend their lives in and out of prison. There are so many cases we could point to of suffering. Why? And then this is a quote from the book of Job. So I have been assigned months of misery. I shall not see happiness again, unquote. Job in today's first reading sounds like many of us going through these last 11 months. Will this pandemic ever end? Is there any hope we will return to any kind of happiness in life? The story of Job in the Old Testament is a somber reflection on bad things happening to a good person. Job had everything in life and was faithful to God. Yet in an instant it was all gone, including all his children who died in a tragic windstorm, as well as losing his own health. He can't understand it. The book details his lamentations and struggle to keep faith. In the end, he realizes God has always been present, even in misery, and God cares for him. There's a happy ending, despite the intense suffering and feelings of abandonment he undergoes. Sickness in first century Palestine was associated with sin, as we have noted before. People feared God more than loved God, since God to them was a punisher, a vengeful God who would inflict sickness and other bad things on those who were unfaithful. When someone was sick, it was understood they had sinned and were suffering the consequences. The community did not tolerate the sinner and often expelled the sick, furthering their misery. Jesus comes presenting another face of God, the compassionate healer who shows love, especially to those most rejected and vulnerable. Jesus calls God Father, which was not a term that Jews used for God at the time. It was a whole different way of looking at God. The sick in the Gospel of Mark are a symbolic reference to the wider issue of social exclusion. People are always finding ways to exclude others for whatever reason. Jesus broke through the barriers of exclusion. Jesus is the compassion of God. Jesus reaches out and touches the excluded, the suffering, those who feel no one cares, and returns them to the community. He shows that God does not forget our pain. In the gospel, Jesus' healing aims at the illness and exclusion so that people work out a new meaning in life. Peter's mother-in-law is healed for service. The miracles of Jesus are more about a comprehensive healing because he often challenges religious and political powers and structures that oppress, exclude, and enslave. It is holistic healing that goes beyond a biomedical function. Jesus has to break barriers to heal and restore people to the community. It often puts him at odds with the leaders and rulers of society. This is the last part. There is much in the way of misery and feelings of hopelessness in our community and in our world. The virus has taken a huge toll on us. Many people need healing in the midst of this pandemic. How does a follower of Jesus respond? We can contribute to the healing that is needed in people and in the community, even though we might not be in the medical field. We can affirm in others the feeling of being part of society, of helping them work out a new meaning in life. How do we do that? If we look at the model of Jesus in this gospel, we will see that it usually involves some service and even suffering on my part to take the time and effort. Our words and actions can bring healing, inclusion, and compassion. People need that so much. In the end, there is not an answer to why there is suffering in our world. However, there is a response. God is present, and so must we be.
Oh, no, okay.
We're still fighting up here about who's going to talk. So what we're going to do is we're going to break into our triads for the first time today. And each time we do this, we're going to have the same 3 questions that we want to discuss with one another based on what we just heard from our storyteller. The first question is, what did you hear? The second question, how did it resonate with you? Why or why not? And the third is, what story came to your mind as you were listening to Father David, in this case, tell the stories he told? We're going to use this as an opportunity to engage one another in our own personal stories. So you will now have 10 minutes in your triad, and I'll give you a warning at the 2-minute mark and at the 1-minute mark to bring us back together to our next PSA and then our next author. So let's break into our triads and talk for the next few minutes.
As noted already, we want to continue to highlight the portal story announcements throughout the day, and we have 2 more that we're about to share with you. The first is from Know Your Neighbor. So if I could ask Elizabeth Coffey to come on up. Thank you. She's with the HEB Butt Foundation, and let us know what you can tell us.
Reports and articles.
Let's go to the side. There you go.
Reports and articles written over the last decade have peeled back layers to the reality that San Antonio is one of the most economically segregated cities in the U.S. and the most impoverished major city. The HE Butt Foundation decided that if we say we care about children and families in San Antonio, we have to care about this reality. One of the interventions we felt was ours to respond to was the narrative problem our city has around those who are experiencing poverty. Through our storytelling platform, Know Your Neighbor, we aim to come alongside the community to tell more complete stories of San Antonio with the hopes of helping San Antonians understand all of our roles in response to the social, racial, and economic inequity faced by so many who call this place home. Thanks.
And is Molly Hardwick here? All right, fantastic. Come on up. This is about the backpack people.
Somewhere down south of here, there's a woman with an armload of grass, weaving a basket that'll float the Rio Grande. She'll send her baby on it, the river running wild and fast, to curry the favor of whatever pharaoh owns the land. The Interfaith Welcome Coalition believes that every person, especially those who have been forced by violence to flee their homes, deserve the dignity of hospitality. At the Greyhound bus station in the San Antonio airport, we receive asylum seekers coming directly from the border or ICE detention centers en route to their sponsors across the country. a fresh meal, a few bottles of water, a hygiene kit, a backpack, a blanket, or a borrowed phone to call family members. These are all small things that we give, that we hope communicate a very loud welcome.
It's so inspiring to hear what's going on in our city. It really, really, really is. And so now, by the way, just go like this if you can't hear me, because it's a very directional mic. Okay. All right, so now it's time for our next author to welcome Naomi Shihab Nye. Naomi is San Antonio's poet extraordinaire, known by many, 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 locally and globally, for her humble, earthy, and very human insights into life, her intelligence, humor, and her kindness. Her 2022 book is a story about a young boy that is prophetic for all ages, The Turtle of Michigan. Hold up her book. I might hold it up, I don't have it. Oh. Anyway, she has it. Yay! Okay, so stories like Naomi's can spark our imagination and may inspire us to action, no matter what our age is. And so Naomi also is being invited to share her own reflection on the healing power of stories and why specifically from her own perspective, stories need to be told in San Antonio today. And I think she's going to honor us with a little piece of reading from her book. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Father David, for inspiring us all. Thanks to the Peace Center for inviting us. And it's very touching to have such an encouraging place to go on such a sad day of sad memories and positive things to be thinking about and considering. As an Arab American, 9/11 was doubly tragic because I realized not only had the United States, the country in which I was born, been attacked and was now grieving, but the entire Middle East and its reputation would be affected. And I felt that it was part of my job to encourage children to tell their stories, to get to know one another a little better, not to look for people who matched them. And so I felt that my role working with children changed after 2001. I had not before that day always identified as an Arab American, but I did after that because it was important for me to say the vast majority of people in the Middle East abhor this act of violence and would never do anything mean to anyone else. So please know that this did not represent the whole Middle East any more than the shooter in Uvalde represented all the people of Uvalde. So I was surprised with how people responded to this, and I kept thinking of my father, who was extremely grief-stricken. He would live 6 more years, but he always said, as a Palestinian who had lost his own home in 1948, he always said, we don't achieve anything by pontificating. We only get to know one another and care about one another through telling our stories. When you tell a story, you find out what the story is, and you find out how many stories are similar. So I realized today in this room for the first time that the book I'm speaking about actually connected to that decision I had to make at the time, that I wanted to tell a story about more not just in poems, which I'd always been writing, but in little novels for elementary readers, which I had never written before that time. So it began with missing my father ferociously after he died, and it felt unspeakable how much we miss our closest people when they die. So I thought, well, I'll have to speak about it in another way. I'll just tell a story about someone else who's preparing to miss someone. How are they going to face up to it? What's going to happen to them? So the character I chose was a 7-year-old named Arif, who reminded me very much of my own son, who's here today. So I have to mention that he's here. He's 36, he's not 7. But I remembered with great love the wonderful relationship he had with my father. And I thought, well, I can have this little boy in the country of Oman, a very peaceful country in the Middle East that not enough people have visited. It's so beautiful and amazing. I can have him preparing with his parents to move to the United States while they get their PhD degrees. By the way, this is very common for the people of Oman. And then they will be moving back after 3 years. And he is fretting about how much he is going to miss his grandfather. If I gave that little distance to my own grief, I could look at it, I could think about it. It helped me so much. It was the greatest therapeutic healing tool, just to talk about someone else based on him missing someone else based on my dad. It was a challenge. I wrote the book in ridiculous ways. I started out with a pillow as the main character. It was instantly rejected by my longtime editor. Then I rewrote it as 2 houses were the main characters. She didn't like it, and she wrote me 3 questions. Where are the people in this story? You love people. What is this book really about? And then I thought, love and grief and sadness at separation. And then she also added, what is wrong with you? So that got me going. As the story evolved, I could feel it becoming more the magic of my father, the magic of my son, how they had connected. But I was still writing about these 2 other characters, Arif, age 7, and Sidi, grandfather. The grandfather had a kind of endless optimism through the first book, The Turtle of Oman, and that reminded me of my father, who always kept optimism that Jewish people and Arab people were really brothers and sisters and needed to share a small country that they all loved. And why couldn't they look at other places where people are all mixed together and finding ways to live? So, thank you. So, more of my father came through the grandpa in this story than I ever could have guessed it would. It was as if I kept getting letters from him. And the best award I ever got in my life was from a mysterious geriatric library society that said I had written the most positive older character in any book for kids or teens printed that entire year. So I thought, well, that's pretty impressive. My dad would be pleased. So then this book had a nice, just comfortable life, and kids were amazing about relating to the story, even if they had never heard of Oman before they read it. I remember first going to St. Luke's Episcopal in San Antonio, and the kids saying, well, he's experiencing what we felt when we had to move from 2nd grade to 3rd grade. We didn't want to. We loved our 2nd grade teacher. We didn't want to move. So suddenly kids were like making it a book that applied to more things than I could ever have dreamed, not just immigration of privileged, educated people. So the book was adopted in the state of North Carolina to be given away to all the kids. And this was fantastic because I got to spend a lot of time with kids of rural North Carolina, which I had really never worked in that much. And also it was turned into a play, which I got to see 7 times. And, but the kids also were just like my editor. When it was over, they were not that happy with me. They said, when our events were over and I was signing their books, they said, but what happened next? What did he go? Were the kids nice to him in the United States? Did they welcome him? So that's how The Turtle of Michigan was born. I promised them on a napkin in North Carolina that I would carry on the story, and this came out this year. The book helped me during the pandemic because it was revisiting characters I had always felt very close to. Not only then my son and my father, but these 2 people who had now become real people, and then now all the people of Michigan he was going to meet. when they got there. Really, while we all lived through COVID isolation, I think many of us were going through drawers and closets and old boxes of letters and kind of telling ourselves the stories of our lives again and deciding what we needed to save tangibly and what we could release. The most important thing to me in this book was that sense of how quickly do we come to feel at home in a new situation? And what is he going to do about this enormous missing of his grandfather, who barely knows how to send an email and still hasn't figured out how to answer his phone? So it has always seemed to me in my life that when you read and you write and you tell stories, even if you're making them up as you go along, your horizon grows, you feel not alone, you don't have to be with people who match you, and if you just tell a story, they will be able to enter into your experience and feel closer to you. While I was working on The Turtle of Michigan, the Sultan Qaboos of Oman actually died. And so that enters into this story. He is someone whom the kids of Oman had hero worshipped. And so I'm just going to read a little paragraph about him, because a lot of people never paid that much attention to him in this country, but he was a very amazing figure. He protected the turtles. Arif liked that especially about him. He welcomed visitors from other countries. Before Sultan Qaboos, Oman didn't have many visitors. He tried to establish peace when there were international quarrels. He was known as a tolerant peacemaker. He had allowed temples and churches for other religions besides Islam to be built, Buddhist and Christian and Hindu and others, to serve residents from other countries. And he never stood high on a podium and said, "Look at me." Even though his picture hung in many buildings, most people never saw him. He was humble. Maybe he was shy.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Oops. Okay, so now back to your triads, and it's the same instructions. Bring yourself, bring your whole self, and it doesn't matter if you don't get through all the questions, just, share and speak. And so what touched you? What resonated with you? If there was anything difficult, what was difficult? And does a story come to mind, like something that happened to you or someone in your life? So that's basically it. And enjoy each other's company, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Sounds like we're having some fantastic and engaging conversations, which is the whole goal of today. So very glad for that. We're going to announce 2 more of our PSAs. And our next portal partner is a San Antonio artist and peace laureate, Lionel Sosa. Lionel's not going to be able to be here with us today, but his story project, Living in My Skin, is. This is an example of how we will encounter the portal online. There's an image reflective of the project. His images are his paintings. That's followed by the organization, the project's name, 2 brief descriptive paragraphs, followed by a logo, and ink in the story project. And Lionel's project gives us another example of what we may encounter. Remember, we are working with technology. His link is not working today. And when that happens, take a breath, come back and visit the website later. And we hope that it will be next time. Our second PSA is No Child Sold. If I could please invite Belinda McAllister up to tell us about hers.
Thank you guys for having us, and you should know that if they hadn't given me 30 seconds, it would have been 2 hours. So I'm kind of like y'all, a little long-winded. Oh, I'm sorry. I was afraid I'd be way too loud. There we go. Ransom Life launched an awareness campaign called No Child Sold. And so get ready, because I'm going to make you a little bit uncomfortable here. The campaign was launched because the children in Bexar County need protection. It's about that simple. If we're only 7 years old, selling children is nothing new, but it's now high tech, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business. B as in boy, billion. So right now, if going through COVID, we all had apps on our phones, and we had food delivered to the door, or we picked it up. You can order a child online, just like you can order a pizza. Now that is the truth, I'm not overstating it. You're seeing more and more in the news because we're trying to bring awareness. News 4, Fox 29 both partnered with us this year so that we could get some stories out. And we do 3 things. We counsel children and their families, we mentor the children and their families, but more importantly, we are in schools, we're in the Ys, we're in front of your Little League, we're in the churches, we're anywhere where a group may be around a child. And so we teach everybody from the bus driver to the child at school, the counselors, the principals, the teachers, the nurses. It is a bigger problem, and there is absolutely every zip code in our city that's affected. More importantly, I need you to understand, I had someone very prominent tell me at breakfast, it doesn't happen in my neighborhood. It does happen in your neighborhood. So we just need to be heads up, and that's what we're trying to do right now. It's a very profitable business, and we need it to go away, not in my city. I really want you to join us in the battle. The campaign and our website is full of stories. So when you go to Ransom's Life, No Child Sold, it's not all sad stories. There are good things that are coming through Ransom Life. Thank you for listening.
Belinda, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thank you so much for telling us about it, like a wake up. And yeah, this story portal thing is actually quite good. What do you think?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Okay, it's time for our next author, Simran.
Moved across the room.
Oh, you moved. Hi, Simran. So, Simran clearly is a true Texan and clearly a true Sikh, who born and raised here in San Antonio under the guiding light of the first Sikhs to move into San Antonio, as I understand, right? GP and Winky Singh. GP himself is an honored San Antonio Peace Laureate. According to Anne Halke, this very gathering today was birthed by a twinkle in GP's and Winky's eyes, as was Simran. Okay. And it is indeed true of the model being shared here today with all of you, that gathering like this, the formation of collaboratives, in this case the storytelling one, but they begin with a spark, a twinkle of an idea, and people who get it and feel it come together and bring the idea into being. We're hoping you're starting to see the simplicity of a gathering like this one, storyteller and telling, followed by conversation and mutual storytelling, done in the spirit of authentic sharing, that all of this actually does contribute to community healing. So Simran no longer lives in San Antonio, but he never forgets us either. So we're going to hear his own reflections. We'll love to hear his own reflections on the healing power of stories and why specifically, from his perspective as a San Antonian, now New Yorker, that stories need to be told in our current context. So again, I can't hold up the book, but you can. His book, The Light We Give. By the way, yes, I should say that there are pre-signed copies of Simran's book available because he's going to need to take up, right, immediately after this because it's his daughter's very first day of school. He needs to get back to New York. Amazing. Welcome, Simran.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you. The first text message I got from when I woke up this morning was from my wife. And she said, be careful when you're going through the airport today. Remember that it's 9/11. And of course it had occurred to me, but just the fact that this is our conversation, our daily memory, it means something. And as I was preparing for our conversation this afternoon, I thought maybe I would foreground the conversation a little bit differently and ask the question, what are the risks of not telling our stories? And the reason it comes up for me that way, I'll ask the question again, what are the risks of not telling our stories? What are the consequences? What do we lose when we don't tell our stories and when we don't hear one another's stories? And I say this because I come from a community in this country for more than 100 years now. And more than a century later, still people have no idea who we are or what we're about. And the challenge is this, right? People see me walking down the street. They don't know a thing about what my turban represents to me, but they think they know. They make assumptions based on their stereotypes, and they place that assumption on who I am and how I ought to be treated. That's the risk, right? That's the risk of not knowing one another's stories, especially when we live in a culture now where it's not just an openness about telling our stories, we're not even willing to listen to one another's stories. We're not willing to listen. Like we can't stop, we can't be bothered, and more importantly, we don't trust people. We don't trust one another. That's the risk, or at least part of it. And I want to start by sharing an excerpt from my book that I thought of as I received my wife's text message, and also because it refers to a very close friend of mine from high school who I met up with yesterday. And it's a moment from when I just graduated from Trinity. I did my undergrad there. I started at Harvard Divinity School and was living in Boston. And I'll just share what happened there, and then we'll talk through it for a moment. I was living in Boston as a graduate student when I had a particularly rough experience with racial profiling at airport security. My college roommate Bill was getting married in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and a bunch of our college friends were going to meet up there. I arrived at Boston Logan Airport 2 hours early. I knew from past interactions with airport security that for people who look like me, it's best to allow buffer time for additional security measures. I'd become accustomed to that, but on this trip, the TSA agent insisted that he needed me to unwrap my turban. I wasn't hiding any explosives in there. I resisted the urge to shout out his racism at the top of my lungs, and instead, I politely explained to him that his request violated TSA policies. And then I asked to speak to his supervisor. When his supervisor also insisted that I remove my turban, I was incredulous. I urged him to look up the official policies for religious headwear. I explained to him the personal and religious significance of my turban. I even pulled out one of my brother Darsh's old jokes, that if a turban Sikh goes to a nude beach, they'd still be wearing their turban. None of this changed the manager's mind, and ultimately we agreed that we could go to the airport bathroom, where I would have relative privacy to untie and retie my turban. This was the best compromise we could find, but I was still upset and unhappy. They were still treating me like a threat, presumed guilty until proven innocent. After the security agent confirmed that there was nothing under my turban but my long, uncut hair, TSA gave me permission to go catch my flight. I was fuming, and wanting to vent, I wrote a brief description of what had happened and did something I'd never done before. I posted about the racist encounter on Facebook. Within minutes, I received a text message from Marshall, one of my best friends from high school. I can't believe that happened to you, man. I'm so sorry. I felt shocked and hurt. Marshall had been there during the violent backlash following 9/11. He actually supported me through it. How could he not know the racism I dealt with my whole life? I picked up the phone and called him, and I asked him exactly that. And his response surprised me. I knew you dealt with a lot of hate then, and I assumed that you still did years later. But you never really talked about it. Even when I asked, you would dismiss it. I'm really sorry. I realized that Marshall was right. I'd never given him the chance to know what I'd experienced, nor had I let anyone else. I felt uncomfortable drawing attention to racism that came my way, because it seemed selfish to call attention to myself. When other people in communities I knew, including my own, were dealing with more direct discrimination and severe persecution, it felt inappropriate to complain about my own experiences that paled in comparison. I was unsure how to move forward. I sat down to read some of my favorite writers, with the hope of finding clarity on what humility and selflessness might look like in a situation like this. I came across a gem while reading James Baldwin. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. This insight transformed my own spiritual outlook and political philosophy. I resolved in that moment to never again shy away from speaking up. I would share my experiences with others so they could see the truth that they wouldn't ever see otherwise. Doing so would be an act of love and justice. Sharing about my life could do more than simply draw attention to myself. I could share with the intention of teaching and illuminating, but only if I could ever get over my fear of opening up. Education is service. What I want to share here is there are lots of reasons for us not to tell our stories. And there are lots of reasons for us not to listen. It's easier to go the other way. And part of what I learned through James Baldwin is this question that I raised at the beginning. What do you lose? What do you lose when you don't share? What do you lose when you don't take that risk? And what he tells us, if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. Until and unless we do otherwise, our stories will continue to go on until our ability to humanize one another will continue to fall flat. One of the decisions I made after 9/11 was to become a professional storyteller. This is what I wanted to do. Because what happened was our communities, and I mean Muslims, Sikhs, South Asians, Arabs across the board were getting attacked left and right, and there was no story around them. No one knew except those who were being targeted. And what I saw as a college student at Trinity was we don't have power. We don't have a platform in this country. No one's going to care about us because how could they? They're never relating. They're never hearing about us. And at first I thought, okay, what I need to do is become a historian. I need to become a scholar. So I have a platform so I can then go forward and give people the information. If people just knew the facts about 6, then maybe they would care about us more. And I learned quickly that was a false outlook. Facts don't move people. Information helps, but it doesn't get to liberation. We have more access to knowledge and information at our fingertips than any society in human history. And look where we are. Compassion comes from connection. Connection comes through humanizing. Humanizing comes through stories. So to me, that is the power of storytelling, both in the giving and in the receiving. Thank you.
thank you for being so clear about like what is the purpose, the deep purpose of what we're doing here. Thank you for articulating it so clearly and so beautifully.
We have 10 more minutes with our triads, and I'd like you to reflect on the same questions. What did you hear? How did it resonate with you? What story came to your mind? So let's take 10 minutes to talk. Okay, if we could begin turning our attention back towards the front. We have 2 more portal story announcements. Thank you. Our next portal story announcement is Stories of Bankers. Producers of this story project, 2022 San Antonio Peace Laureate, our own San Antonio Food Bank. If I could please invite Julian Ledesma.
Hello. My name is Julian Ledesma. I work for the San Antonio Food Bank. I've been working there for the past 5 years, and I am, thank you. My official title is Storytelling Manager. I am also the photographer for the San Antonio Food Bank as well. This position was created in the beginning of the pandemic. And so I would go out and take pictures and document things that were happening, and I'd just come back with stories and quotes and of San Antonians and what they're going through. And so at the time, I would come back with these stories and I'd say, keep doing that. Keep going out there. Keep getting people's names and numbers. People think it's easy to be a storyteller, but working with a food bank, if you can just imagine yourself being in line trying to get food, and I'm there with a camera putting it in your face and what's your name? It's hard. There's some people who don't want to share their story. And I have to find those individuals because I always say 1 in 50 want to say their story, and they want you to know where they come from. They want you to know their story of resilience. I grew up in the lines of food banks. I was raised by a single mom, and it is a beautiful and humbling experience to work for the food bank and to do what I do. Our website is filled with the stories I'm speaking of. We have a marketing and communications department, so I work with videographers. Once we find the individual that wants to tell their story, once we quote them, once we do a little bit of photojournalism, then we get a videographer to tell so that they can tell their story in their words with dignity, transparency, and above all, equality. I love what I do, and I want everyone to know that this storytelling power comes with education, right? No one should go hungry. No child should go hungry. I remember every meal I skipped as a child, and I don't want that ever to happen. And that's why these stories are so powerful, because we're teaching every single individual, guess what? No one should be hungry. The food bank is there for you. They're there to help you get connected to the different nonprofits that you're gonna need. And we're here, we have your back. These stories are stories of resilience, and please, when you're having a bad day, or you're having something that's not sitting well with you, listen to one of these stories and gain the perspective of someone else that is going through something far worse. Thank you so much. On behalf of Eric Cooper and myself, thank you.
I'd like to invite up Tracy Hamilton to talk about where I live and where I work.
Hi, thank you all. My name is Tracy Hamilton. I'm the story editor for the Tracy Hamilton. I'm the story editor for the San Antonio Report, and I took very seriously my mission of only writing something that would take 30 to 45 seconds to read, but since other people have broken the rule, One of the things I wanted to say is when I was hired at the San Antonio Report, which was founded 10 years ago as a free local news site, online only, nonprofit, they asked me if I would like the job of content editor. And I said, I would very much like the job, but we call it story editor, because that's what we do, we tell stories. And one of the most popular features since we started 10 years ago was Where I Live. And those are written by the residents who live in neighborhoods all over San Antonio. And it was an instant hit. And every Saturday, a Where I Live leads the site. And last year, we started a new feature, Where I Work. Same idea, members of the community talk about either their jobs or the businesses that they run, and just like Where I Live, they've been incredibly popular. We love to hear from the community to tell their own stories, and so we are very honored to be part of this, and I thank you all very much.
Well, now, last, but in no possible way at least, we have another San Antonian Peace Laureate. We welcome and thank Mario Salas for being with us today. From a young age, Mario Salas began questioning the stories that he grew up with. He has been a fighter all his life for fairness and for redressing systemic injustices. His contributions to the unions and civil rights movements in San Antonio have recently been recognized in the new Labor Plaza located in the public art garden on the Riverwalk. Questioning accepted stories, realizing how they have helped perpetrate injustice, has become an important part of our times. Can't help thinking of what Simran said, quoting James Baldwin, if I love you, I have to make you aware of the things that you don't know. So, well, yes, we also need to know that our version may not be the only version. Like my triumph is perhaps your tragedy in the same, so for some, what Mario Salas is saying will be a blessing. At last, our truth is being spoken. For others, it will be difficult. Having the wisdom and maturity to listen to the other side with respect, especially when it is challenging, is a critical skill, like Simran said, that we all need to learn. So now Mario will come and tell us why he thinks storytelling is important and tell us a little bit about his work. Thank you, Mario. Welcome, Mario.
Okay, when he said 10 minutes, I almost fainted. Well, I'm going to start off from a long time ago. When I was around 10 years old or so, my father took me to the Alamo because that was the thing to do at that particular time. And as we were coming out of the Alamo, I got the little Davy Crockett hat and all of that. I've since buried that, by the way, but we coming out of the Alamo, and this old man, obviously a Mexican-American, he just, out of the blue, my father didn't know him, I didn't know who he was or anything, he just stopped us as we were walking across Alamo Street, and he says, everything you all just heard in there is all a lie. He just walked off. So my father looked at me, and I looked at my dad, and we kind of didn't say anything to each other, and we kept on going. But that comment stuck with me all my life. And certainly I was able to experience what he meant. There's several things I think people have to understand, and that is the mark of freedom in this country was grace. racial distinction was the mark of freedom in this country. And the mark of freedom meant you had to be white. That's the mark of freedom. You know the old saying, free, white, and 21? They didn't just come out with that out of the blue. It was developed over very long periods of time. So this mark of freedom, based on race, is what pretty much controlled the narrative of the entire country for hundreds of years, not just something that happened recently. I got into a discussion one time with another professor, and he was saying, I just don't believe that Texas settlers came from the United States and settled here because of manifest destiny. And I told him, well, I don't believe that either. They came here because of racial destiny. So manifest destiny became a mask, if you will, to hide white supremacy. And that mask being a religious one. God said we should conquer this country from East Coast to West Coast. It had nothing to do with race, so it's a mask. And that's one of the components of white supremacy, is to mask the hatreds in various ways. So I concentrated on this book. I mean, I was pretty much in your face with the title, The Alamo, Cradle of Lies, Slavery, and White Supremacy. And then I had a big crack in the Alamo, right? And some chains being broken. And I did that simply because we need to understand the fullness of the story that we grew up with. And that fullness obviously doesn't deal with the things we never hear about. And there are a lot of things. One of the racial myths that existed during the time of the Alamo was that one white man could kill 10 Mexicans. That was a myth. So I multiplied the number 185, which is what they claim. Some people say 250. I multiplied 185 times 10, and that means they killed 1,850 Mexicans. I didn't believe that story, not for a second. So I looked at the primary source documents, and you know what I had to do? I had to read a lot before I did this. And some of the stuff I already knew, but it forced me to read about 20 some odd books, the gold mine of which was a 900-page book by Todd Nelson called The Alamo Reader, in which he puts side by side quotes out of newspapers, quotes that supposedly this person said, that person said, and then gives it credibility or non-credibility as far as the primary source documents go. And I had to read a bunch of other ones, and I noticed in the titles of some of the books, the hero worship was just quite sickening. 13 Days to Glory, when there was literally not hardly any fighting for about 12 days. It was mostly cannon fire. So I don't know what they meant by that. So I got a little problem with that. So, of course, on the last days when there was some fighting, but according to Dr. Philip Tucker, most of the fighting took place outside the Alamo and never inside. And it took place outside because in Dr. Philip Tucker's research and in Todd Nelson's and others, about 120 rather, of them ran from the Alamo along what we now call Commerce Street. At that time it was called Gonzales Way because that was a road to get to Gonzales, Texas. When they went there, and look, we can argue about whether some of them were cowards or some of them were rather seeking to fight another day. I don't know the answer to that. In any war, some people are always cowards, some people are always brave, and there's always a mix in between. That's the way wars are. So what happened to them versus what happened to the ones who stayed inside? 60, we can argue about the numbers, 60 to 80 stayed inside. It was cold, there was no lights, there was no fighting in the daytime like in the John Wayne movie. By the way, that John Wayne movie was filmed at, I want to say, a theater in Los Angeles Heights, which no longer exists, but that was a sundown town. What did that mean? Blacks had to be out of that city before dark. That's where the Alamo was filmed. The premiere of the filming was done. Okay, or the premiere of the film was done. So I'd like to concentrate on that. So what happened to the ones who fought inside? According to Dr. Tucker and a lot of other primary source documents, 20 to 30 minutes, they were all killed, and it was over. Of the ones who ran, about 120, it took about 2.5 hours to kill them because they were hunted down by Santa Anna's Lancers. And those Lancers had a name. I like to concentrate on stuff people don't know. The name of those Lancers in Spanish was Los Morenos Libres de Veracruz, which means the free blacks of Veracruz. This was Santa Anna's all-black regiment. What happened to that story? Well, obviously no one wanted to tell it, because these were blacks who killed most of the Alamo defenders. These were free black men who had been in Mexico and in New Spain, is what Mexico was called before its freedom from Spain. So that story is obviously never told. So the story that's told is told through a racist lens, through a white supremacist lens. Even the story about Joe is crazy. Joe, the slave, he doesn't have a last name, but he was owned by William Bear Travis. So why wasn't he ever Joe Travis? That's interesting, why that's never claimed. The other thing is, most people don't know, is Joe, the slave, his brother, William Wells Brown, was one of the greatest abolitionists in this country. A black abolitionist. They never knew one another because they were separated from birth, or from at least when they were children. Separated, stolen from their mom, and then sold off to different slave owners. Well, and in addition to that, William Wells Brown's mother, who is Joe, quote, the slave, and I don't like to keep calling Joe the slave, he has a last name, keep calling him that, that's total disrespect for a person of color. Joe the slave, he ought to be called Joe Boone, or Joe Travis, or Joe Brown, but not Joe the slave. So I got a big problem with that. The reason why I would say Joe Brown, because his mother, there is enough evidence to support the fact that his mother was raped by Daniel Boone, the great frontiersman. There's enough evidence to show that David Crockett, who fought at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend with Sam Houston, by the way, with Andrew Jackson, who later becomes the president, there's enough evidence to show that when they killed Native American people at that battle, Crockett actually removed the sexual organs of pregnant women and made tobacco pouches out of them and hung them around his belt. They also gutted women who were pregnant at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend and hung the fetuses on Andrew Jackson's militia on the horses as part of the war trophy. So to tell me that David Crockett was a hero, you're going to have a hard time proving that when you know the things that are just not said. So Santa Anna had a black regiment. There were black Afro-Mexicans in this town. Joe the slave, I prefer to call him Joe Boone, because that tells a deeper and better story. So these racist things that are going on, you have to look at, when you look at an elephant with a microscope, you might be making a mistake, because you're not looking at the whole picture. When you look at the whole picture without using the microscope, you may also be making a mistake. So you have to know how to zoom in and zoom out when you look at any historical phenomenon. I always like to say the things that people don't know, the power of racial myth, and how all these things are connected. And what I try to do is connect them all within the book itself. By showing the connectedness, by showing that even poems that kids learn have a racial component. 10 little monkeys jumping in the bed, one they fell off and one bumped his head, right? You know that story? They used to say 10 little darkies jumping in the bed. So I can name one poem after another. The bell has rang, and I can do this all night long. So I'm going to conclude with that, but when you get the book, you will see that I have brought up all kinds of things to weave the web of the power of white supremacy. Thank you.
Okay, let's start bringing our attention back to the center. I'm sure you've had some very robust conversations today. As we kind of bring this in for a landing, we want to highlight two more of our, we've heard from many PSAs, we have two more that we'd like to highlight. If if you do, by the way, know of other stories in the city of San Antonio that we didn't talk about, we would love to know that. So please let one of us know about other stories that we can tie in to the portal. Our next to last story is San Antonio Story Night. And the producers of this project, if we could have Sue Kuntz come on up.
Sue Kuntz, and I'm the president of the San Antonio Storytellers Association, and we're elated to be part of this. We are honored. Once there was, and once there was not. Mukashi, Mukashi. Habia una vez. Once upon a time. How does your story begin? We are 31 years strong, and I bet you didn't even know we were here in San Antonio. But you do now. The San Antonio Storytellers Association welcomes story lovers and storytellers to share and listen to all genres of stories. We meet virtually the very first Wednesday of each month. Right now, hopefully live eventually. This most ancient of human arts brings people together in enjoyment, wonder, and common humanity. Please take a flyer right outside these doors, and we hope to see you at our next SASA gathering. Please read as much as you can up there. Thank you.
And lastly, I'd like to have Leslie Meck come on up and talk about stories of the Holocaust.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Meck. I'm the director of the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio. We are the only museum and education center of our kind in South Texas and in San Antonio. And we serve as a memorial and an education resource center for the region, bridging the stories of the past with future generations through stories from our survivors and their families from the Holocaust. We serve more than 20,000 students and visitors every year, and we use the lessons from the Holocaust and these stories to teach about the dangers of hatred and bigotry in order for us to create a more compassionate and just society. So please come visit us.
Thank you so much. Oops, is that on? No. Yeah, I just wanted to say I did visit your museum for the first time the other day, and it is a wonderful resource. And it's important to visit. I would say it's important to take a deep breath and be, in good shape for listening to things that have challenges in listening, but it's important. So thank you, and thank you to the Storytellers Association. Yay. Okay, so now just before our final words, a little something about our story portal. What is it called? Anyway, our story portal collaborative. Yeah. So we would like to acknowledge and thank Sean McCullough, who created this beautiful website. He's a freelance web designer, and so if you need a website, get in touch with him. Kristen, his daughter, is here, and could you stand, Kristen, and let us acknowledge you. And now, okay, well, no, I'd like to say this, that the hopes of our community collaborative, I just gotta say, this is really, really good, isn't it? Like, it's just been so deeper and deeper and really, okay. Anyway, the hopes of our community collaborative are to share this replicable model of a web page to any other towns and cities throughout the nearly 450 global compassionate cities, like our compassionate San Antonio. Think about it. Story Portal, this is Story Portal SATX. There could be Story Portal Austin, I come from, well, I was born in Winnipeg, Story Portal, Winnipeg, why not? But whatever, it's a replicable model, and there's actually, as well, on our story portal here, there's the place where you can, if you have a story, like I have a story, you know, and you want to tell it, there's a place where you can do that. There's a button that says submit, and you just click on that button, submit at the top, and okay, there it is, yeah. Tell your story. What hardship has impacted you? What kindness has come your way? What stories did your parents or grandparents tell? And so on. You know, your own story that you want to share. You press the submit button and it'll take you to this story submission form where you can give your information and you can tell your story, and the Storytellers Association is going to be curating those stories for us, so for everybody. So that, and now, okay, well, imagine what could happen here in San Antonio if teachers and preachers and community organizers, if staffs at senior centers and schools, if places like community centers and congregations utilize this story portal, maybe even locate, so, you know, the thing is, you have a handout on your chair with a kind of flow of what we did here today, and what we did here today is really quite good, and you can spread the goodness by organizing your own. So, and if you have any questions, just ask. We'd be delighted to talk about it with you. So, now I would like to ask the members of the San Antonio Story Community Collaborative, people who created this thing, to stand. Yay! And also, okay, so stay standing up. Kristen, get back up. And now, all the story projects and story portal partners, stand up too, please. Up. And now, we invite everyone, every storyteller and healer, everyone in this place to stand with us all for our final word. Yay! For our final word.
Thank you. Okay, so let me just have you grab a seat just for a minute as we wrap this up. It's not the end of the day. We're almost there. This is a new type of event. The Storytelling Collaborative here in San Antonio created this event. And I want to just get some really quick one-word feedback about what your experience was like today. So let me ask you to just think about one word that encapsulates your experience today. And if you have that one word, if you want to share that with us, raise your hand. What one word captures your experience today? Yes? Informative. Thank you. Inspiring. Awakening. Good. Illuminating. Cool. Okay. In the back. Community. Fantastic. Compassionate. Yes, sir. Do it again. How about repeat? Repeat. Okay, good. Frustrating.
I couldn't get another stuff like I just couldn't get.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Yes. Unifying. Great. Impacting. Yes. Revealing. Great. A call to well, thank you. Let's take one last one. Yes. Powerful. Okay. We do want to invite participation in what's being built here. If this is something you'd like to be part of, we welcome your involvement. So please come and speak to one of the people who you saw stand up as part of this. This is one of the great things about our city in San Antonio, is we like to collaborate and work together to heal our community, to be community. And let's give one last round of applause to all those that put this event on. I think it was a great day. Okay?
I have a quick announcement. I'm Wendy Holberg with Interfaith San Antonio Alliance, along with my friend Dr. Don Martin of the Soul Center and the Trinity University Chapel. We're putting on a night of storytelling. You are all welcome and encouraged to bring your friends. It is October 3rd. You're gonna put that on your phone. October 3rd, from 7 until 8:30. It is an evening called Faith Lifts. Everyday stories from multi-faith voices. It will be at the Raindrop Turkish House on Vance Jackson. October 3rd, 7 to 8:30. Faith Lifts. Everyday stories from multi-faith traditions and voices. See you there. Thanks.
Thank you all for coming. Have a great afternoon.